I don't want to kind of do a big run on sentence and then ask you 10 questions at once, but that's kind of my deal. Like, I think a low code is, it's like, it's in a box, you do stuff and like, that's your thing. And like, can you export it and then maybe like work on top of it, or the extensibility of it is sort of always very questionable. Like, will it be an API? Like, no, it's kind of like, it's this. And then some people like make a whole business out of that. We're like, oh, we'll just keep building this and running on it. And they're like, the licensing fees get more and more and more each year as they grow. And like, all of a sudden they're like, oh man, we're stuck. All we have is like our business logic, like, oh, you own your business logic. Like, what's that? You still have to re-engineer the entire thing. You just maybe have the spec, and among other limitations, right? Like, oh, can I, ship this to the app store? Like, well, no, of course not. Or, they always have limitations, even though you write less code. So you're like, yay, I did that. And maybe that helped me. Like, all it did was maybe replace like Figma, or InDesign, right? Where I could have like maybe made a design thing. It didn't really get me a product that I own. And I feel like this has institutional value, and I could like confidently go capitalize this, raise money, or I could sell this IP to a client if they wanted to acquire it, or I could, but this is way different, right? Now that there's Docker and, microservices weren't real. I'm sure they existed, but I'm not that technical. So if I know it, that means I'm a little behind. But like 10 years ago, we weren't really talking about microservices as much. And I think, Red Hat is down the street in Raleigh. So, obviously they've always been a big proponent of open source, and there's, there's all these different things that plug in as a gem or as a, whatever you want to call it, into tools. So like the concept's been there, but it hasn't been like widely adopted as, we're going to have one non-monolithic application that uses a bunch of small tools that are all replaceable, right? So, your promise is, I don't know. Anyways, maybe the way you said it is actually the best and most succinct way to say it, but is there another way to convey that value? Obviously, even if you took a clip of this for 30 seconds and we're like, hey, developers, this is what I'm talking about. Did you already say it, or would you want to kind of expand upon that in terms of like, customers are the engineers, but everyone's still thinking about business value, and maybe their stakeholders might be asking the questions that I'm kind of asking. And how would you sort of address those?
Yeah, no, we're definitely iterating on messaging as much as we can, and that's why we're working with technical, like senior architect level people, because we can tailor that message to them, because we know their problems, and they know that they need to deliver business value, but they also know the complexities of managing large engineering teams and legacy code bases. So what we're delivering there is a way to look forward to the future into a way where you can build applications faster. You can have custom, like low code interfaces on top of their applications, but they're starting with these components that they already understand now, like microservices. Like where the protocol is gRPC, which is like a Google RPC, remote procedure call. Basically, it plugs into things in a way that they are already comfortable with. And the way that we're composing these, the kind of like the unit of transfer between these components, we can describe that in a way that already is familiar to a lot of senior architects and engineers. Like we're taking a lot of the functional composable concepts from languages like Erlang, Haskell, and translating those into units that allow teams to develop the way that they're doing right now without learning Erlang or Haskell. But we get the benefit of all these things plugging together. And it's easy to see down the line how even if they don't like Vino, or if we're erased from the world and we don't exist, how all of that stuff ends up still being valuable and owned by them. Like the wrapper around their business logic is small and standard, so that you don't have to worry about this low code company having you locked in with monthly fees till the end of time, or losing access to a very, very complex code base because the unit is so small and so standard in its communication that it's very easy to accept. It's kind of like with the Linux containers and Docker. It's like once you realize that when you make a container, when you make an image, what you're doing is putting like a boundary around all the stuff that you own and that you care about, and then you're just connecting that or running that somewhere else. It's easy to stomach because you're not really tying yourself in overwhelmingly to a large company. But yeah, our messaging is definitely it's definitely more technical because we need to get those public wins so that we can show the value and show how it was achieved, because that's really going to be what sells it.
Yep. So I want to make a statement. I don't know if it's true, but I feel like early on in a startup, you spend a lot of time developing kind of like the business logic, but like the key workflow, like the key problem that the thing solved. And then you sort of spend less time on these others because you want to like solve that, you want to show that to a customer. And then as an application is hitting some sort of enterprise scale, you actually spend a lot of time on all the rest of the stuff, right? So like kind of your users, your authentication, your security, like all these other kind of not infrastructure, like, but infrastructure type things. A, is that kind of like true? And B, how does this speak to that, right? So I'm thinking, hey, there's a startup and it's really like, they might not even have a login yet, right? They might just be like, let me just show you how I can visualize this data set. And then I'm going to add some of your auth, and then I'm going to add kind of your role management. And then I'm going to add sort of kind of multi-tenancy if you've got a couple organizations under you. And then you're kind of creating some of that thing, like, and then I'm going to create some reports and some dashboard. But that first thing they do is say, I'll do some business function, whether that's logic or just like, I kind of call it like what's the key problem you're solving and your product's engineering for. How does this address that? Is this like, will this help me with that? Or is that kind of like, that's its own kind of separate code base? We're going to kind of have a UI, and then we're going to plug all the Vino pieces in around that to like, just do all that super fast.
Yeah, so I think let's back up a little bit. We talked about the cloud services and how easy it is to get started there. So when we talk about the cloud, there's kind of like two major chunks of what is cloudy nowadays. There's basically somebody else's hardware, which you throw up your code and you run it up on somebody else's hardware. Might be abstracted through containers or whatever else. And then there are cloud platforms which deliver you infrastructure or specific value for additional monthly fees. So things like the authentication, databases, message queues, things like that. That's basically just running software, and the company's selling you a static API to that software while they manage everything. And it becomes very attractive to use those cloud platforms as a small startup because the early cost is so low and you get so much value so quickly. But as you scale, those costs become outrageous. And that is something that we really want to offer better alternatives for, because plugging all those things in at Amazon, Google, Microsoft, or whatever, they're selling you friction management. They're dealing with their teams internally, making sure they don't break anything, making sure they talk to each other in a certain way, offer certain contracts in a certain way, making sure that the APIs they expose don't change and aren't backwards incompatible, making sure that they maintain security updates. All those things. They're basically just managing all of that, and they can do that because they're a business. It's difficult to do outside of a business because companies don't have an incentive to really work together like that. They draw a boundary around themselves. They manage that. Some companies manage it really, really well, like Amazon and Google. Some companies don't manage it that great and are seen as slower, but in the same industry. So what we're doing is kind of just is taking the friction of those blocks and those services and eliminating it so it becomes easier to plug all that stuff together. And that allows us to deliver things that like cloud services provide for free or less, like open source, and you just plug it in. So like if you're a startup, if you're looking to just roll something out, then at some point when we have the components in there to get a website up and deliver a service, it could just be using an existing schematic and running it. And then you get the web server, you get authentication if you want it. If you don't want it yet, you can plug it in later easily. You get all of the ease of having these APIs that companies now provide as cloud platforms via just like drag and drop schematics.
Yep. And so what do you, how, like, so we have the same shared language. What do you call that part of the product that's like where the, you know, the like you said, the usability, the front end thing, like I'm going to post a picture and people are going to bid on ownership of that picture, right? So that is the thing, like I want to buy that guy's pictures, or, you know, it's going to be turned into an NFT or something. There's all sort of like this, like kind of, that's my product. That's what I think is the unique value, unique selling point in the marketplace. Is that all still kind of be written how it normally is, which is it's custom software and some engineering team sort of language of choice, and then that's its own kind of container in your sort of like cloud of products, or they just pull in your products into their kind of stack, or how does that relationship work? Just for me, kind of the more, maybe more of the product person, or if I'm talking to entrepreneurs or like other engineering leads, I can say, hey, it's kind of like this. Because when I think of low code, they do all of it, right? You WYSIWYG your sort of front end, and then you're like, okay, hey, here's like the use case that I'm trying to solve for. They don't really care about all these other things that are, you know, that you're solving for, which are more kind of technical, which actually help the platform scale. But yeah, tell me about that kind of component of the use case.
Yeah, so that's the way that I see low code and no code right now is that it's very much tailored towards trying to solve all your problems in a kind of a composable way. So if they don't solve it exactly, you can make something that looks similar. While at the other end, there are like frameworks and platforms that developers use to build up things from scratch. And then in the middle, there are things like Shopify, Etsy, Salesforce, which are kind of a mix between platform and no code, low code, where they sell you a service that is more flexible than some things, less flexible than others, but specifically tailored towards a use case. We're what was the question? Let's reset there. Make sure that I'm on the right track before I go in.
Well, no, actually I was going in a great direction. But it's really like when someone's actually doing their startup and they're built, say I've got an idea and I've got my team right here and I'm like, hey, we're going to allow people to post something like that's use case has to be designed, coded. That's a front end. Yeah.
So that what we're calling the Vino Runtime right now is the foundation that can run anywhere. So a Vino component is the building block. Providers are collections of components. Schematics are how components connect. Hosts are networks are collections of schematics. Hosts are running a network. At the top level is like what you could consider an application. The Vino Runtime runs that application, and that can run anywhere. And we need to build that foundation and give it away as a start, because it doesn't exist right now. And what we really want to build is everything on top of it. So we have like a cloud deployment platform in the works, so that you can develop with the Vino Runtime. You can deploy it yourself if you want, or you can press a button and deploy it on our platform. And we're going to be continuing to build our vision of what software and services, what we think software and services should look like on a platform like the Vino Runtime. But it's the first step is getting that runtime out as a foundation and getting people exploring it and playing with it before we can really offer anything. Because otherwise, if we offer the platform alone at the start, then we're no better than any other low code, no code, serverless platform where we own everything. And if you don't like it, then you have to re-implement everything.
And not to make a bad reference, but I mean, this sounds like it's more of a leveled up competitor to just like AWS services, where it's, you've got to start with all those, check all your boxes for queuing and this and Elasticsearch and blah, blah, blah. And then everything else, right? So, as I'm kind of thinking from the other side, non-engineering, and we're going to meet at kind of this future successful product, those are all details, right? Like, okay, how you build, how you deploy, how we get our, kind of continuous integration. I'm like, that's great. But like, if there's something a customer won't buy, right? So initially you're solving kind of is that right? This will be better than and more effective than an AWS because of these kind of features and benefits that you've already outlined.
So you could definitely still use parts of AWS very effectively, like the EC2 running the Vino runtime wherever you want it, just a place to run. But you wouldn't necessarily need the additional services, and that is where kind of the separation is. Like you got the cloud, and then you got like the second tier cloud services, like the Oktas or the PubNub, and then you have like the cloud services that provide services to your business that are still based in the cloud, like Slack or whatever else. Like all those companies are still dependent on clouds and are charging you for all of that. We're making it so that you can start to plug in pieces that offer a lot of that functionality without paying for anyone else. But one of the when we work with developers, what we're looking to get them to is like what we're calling the click point, which is all right, they're going through this effort. It seems weird. They're building what is called a Vino component. Don't really understand the value. It's more work than they have to put forth compared to what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. But then they get to a point where they start to see it work, and then the click moment there is when they realize that there's nothing else to do. Like it's already scalable, it's already deployable, it's already a microservice, it's already easily testable without having a test framework on top of it. It's that like the 80-20% rule, where half of software development takes 80-20. The software takes I'm having difficulty actually describing it because everyone just intrinsically understands it in tech. Basically there's no 20 after you get to the point where you've built a Vino component. Like it's done. And that's really what we've focused on, is making it so that there's no friction connecting any component or schematic or provider or network or host to anything else. It's all reusable. So that means that when we build a way to scale them, then every component that ever exists in the future will be scalable the same way. That's the click moment where you don't have to worry about spinning up multiple threads. You don't have to worry about caching or integration testing. Everything just works after that.
Yep. And that's funny because, I was like, 80-20, 80% of the thing is 20% of the thing. I was like, wait, but it kind of just applies universally. But so I had to just like Google it real quick. But yeah, okay. So 80% of the consequences come from 20% of the causes. But I think that also like is inverted too, right? So it's like, 80% of your customers sometimes represent only 20% of your revenue, or 20% of your profits, or, something like that. Where it's like, well, focus on the 80 or focus on the 20. I think that's the point, is focus on the 20, so like focus on the 20% of the things that lead to 80% of the outcomes, and then, whatever. So, and I think actually maybe from customers, it's usually like 20% of your clients might generate 80% of your revenue. Therefore you have a whole bunch of others that generate, the inverse. So, but anyways, it is kind of universal enough to where you just sort of say it and everyone's like, yeah, lot, little lot, there's savings to be, and optimizations to be made. But I just did not also have a command of that, on the spot. So just switching gears, and we'll try to wrap up kind of on time. I guess, one layer of, so that makes sense. And I think, as you have these one-on-one convos, the use case, just like a lot of products, like the use case is always sort of the challenge. Like very few things seem to be just like universally adoptable, like Netflix, log in and then buy a subscription, and now on your TV you get movies. Or Uber, right? Like, even Uber might have had a marketplace sort of conundrum initially, but a lot of these other things, you really have to focus on kind of the use case, maybe especially early on. And I just came from an IoT conference, which is like the king of use cases, which is, it's not infrastructure. Or my whole talk was like on infrastructure, like how do we just make it like that so that we could drop lots of little, use cases, values on top, as opposed to like everyone selling a one-off end-to-end just to see how many people actually cross the threshold in a retail store. It's like, that's a lot of investment for that one data point. What if all the same infrastructure is there so you could measure that, this, the other, but you have to open it up so many companies are incentivized to be, kind of in that stack. Anyways, so you kind of got into the specific use case now of, almost like if you stay with the AWS, like all those little services aren't just like you're hosting, they're actually selling you more products, and then you are more captive to their infrastructure. So now you can, still deploy with them and use whoever you want, but it's, you kind of own your own services instead of them owning it. It's kind of how I understand it on like the low level.
Yeah, it's owning the platform instead of either paying the time and money to build it yourself or paying the money to be locked into a provider forever. It's kind of like you're old enough. You remember Napster? You remember like older computers that had 8,000 ports to plug in everything, printer ports, serial ports, mouse, keyboard, and now there's USB and especially USB-C, where you just plug one thing in everywhere. It doesn't matter what. That's kind of what we're going for with the Vino components. Like, it doesn't matter. You just plug it in. Plug in anything the same way. It all works the same way.
Yep. So if we go like, one layer of abstraction from the product or whatever, and it's more about kind of the entrepreneurial journey, I guess maybe now take us back to like, what was that big problem where you're like, I must solve that? It was just inefficiency. Was there a bigger vision? Like, man, I want to see more products get to market, or more good ideas are failing because of the kind of bullshittery of all these other things they have to maintain and team sizes, or what was that kind of, the thing that really made you say, I've got to do this?
It's the multi-million-dollar seed rounds in like the Silicon Valley area. It's like to need that much money to even have a chance at being successful in software. It seems ludicrous. Like, all that money early on, like when you're paying these engineers or buying these cloud services, you're basically just redoing the same exact stuff that everyone has to do at the start. And it's too expensive. And I want to make it more accessible. I think on the website we talked about like want to make like a mom and pop internet shop the next unicorn. Want to make it so that you can get Silicon Valley like valuations without Silicon Valley like capital.
Yep, that's a good one-liner. And then from the I guess journey now, I mean, you started the business a couple of years ago, or started kind of tinkering with it. I guess where did it start? Where is it today?
The business, we officially launched about a couple months ago. Things have been in the works seriously for about 6 months. And then we've been toying with these ideas for the past 7 years at Shape. Like we built the first iteration of this platform at Shape because we needed something that we didn't know what we were building while we were building Shape, because we had to iterate so rapidly due to the attackers. And then at the end, we're like, holy crap, this is really cool. Now we are at the point where in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be opening up the beta for the Vino Runtime so that people can start exploring building their own components. And then after that, we'll be expanding that beta while also offering beta for deployment service.
Yep. And tell me, I mean, why are you doing this? I mean, that was not to be a smart ass, but I mean, obviously you've had like a long career, lots of success. This isn't, it's not, I mean, you're not like Bill and Melinda Gates, which that would be a really asshole thing to do. Like, why are you doing this? Like, saving lives, right? You're not saving lives, no offense, but you know what I mean? Like, what's kind of your driving force here? And I guess speak to that if you can.
Scalability and sustainability. Like, I don't think that the way things are progressing right now is sustainable for my kids' futures and others. And I want to do whatever I can now to build out a way for Main Street to exist on the internet.
Yep. Okay, that's awesome. That's a great why. I think that's what I was trying to say. What's your why? That's the book title that I was trying to get at there, but you answered that beautifully. So that's awesome. I feel like that's also a Lego set treehouse in the background. Is that accurate? And did you put that together, or I'm assuming maybe someone else did?
It was a family effort early in the pandemic. That was one of the gifts that we bought ourselves to sit around the table and go through this together. But actually, we have a lot of comparisons to Lego, and I've done a lot of study on Lego because it's a fantastic use case and study on building blocks.
Okay, I'm writing that down because I'm spending a fortune on Legos constantly. But they're actually, I mean, these things are like impossible these days. I mean, they're very hard. It's not just sort of like, put together what you kind of think it is. I mean, it's like if you miss one step, man, your kit is out the door. And is that like that? Well, it shouldn't be like that, right? I mean, I guess it's following instructions, but I mean, you'd hope there'd be more. There's less of that sort of like modularization and components. There's no microservices in some of these Lego sets, right? Like you can't swap things out. It's like step by step or bust.
It's kind of like if you prototype something with Lego, and you can put together something that looks kind of cool, but it's not scaling, either like some parts just not sticking together, whatever else, you can replace a chunk of that with a solid piece of plastic. And if that doesn't work, you replace a chunk of that with a solid piece of aluminum or iron or whatever. And that's kind of what we're going for. It's like it's still going to take effort to architect an application. That's not something we're ever promising is going to go away. We're promising that well-architected applications will be easy to reuse and duplicate, and that will make it so you don't have to worry about it as much. But even if parts of those pieces don't scale because building blocks and like the weight of a Lego set is substantial because of all that wasted plastic in between the blocks, if that's not working for you, you can still break out any chunk of that and replace it with a more performant chunk or something that is custom to you. So it's similar to Lego, but it's not erasing the complexity of building these things. It's making it more reusable.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like that one looks a little more, well, actually we might have owned that set for a while, but they eventually all break down into like the little blocks once they hit our playroom. And then then we just have tons of stuff, and the kids love just kind of building them. So if I was a great or even a good sort of content producer, I would have started with that what's your why, because that's like a really important topic. That'd be a whole other conversation, because I've had similar threads like that, which is the internet doesn't even have to be all big, huge scale or bust businesses, right? There can be the equivalent of Main Street internet businesses. They could just sell shit, or they could just kind of provide a transaction of value. And it doesn't have to be, Silicon Valley or whatever, huge, unicorn or bust. And that hasn't exactly been fully adopted yet because of, some of the barriers to entry and thresholds. And you can get to $1 million or multiple millions of dollars of spend with a 5-person team over 2 years. I mean, people just make a lot of money in this field because there's a lot of the companies that are, driving prices up. Even in our market, obviously there's a big shift to hybrid remote work from anywhere. But when you think about the hubs, I mean, it's great news for real estate, I guess, but Apple's putting a bunch of jobs here. Google's putting jobs here.
Yeah.
I think Nike is coming. It's like, well, I'm happy, but that will make everything more expensive. And so how do we kind of think about longer term sustainability? And Main Street doesn't have to always just be, the proverbial Main Street doesn't have to be like coffee shops and bars and restaurants. There's got to be a future for like this big, powerful thing called the internet to be, providing for other, small businesses. And small business ownership is huge. And they're not, most of them are under whatever 2 employees and under whatever X thousands of dollars a year in revenue. But that's a big driver in kind of economies here and abroad. Right. So like kind of making that, enabling, being a big piece of the enablement of that sort of sustainable ability to build businesses is a pretty worthy cause. So that's great. Well, let's end there. I appreciate you spending time. Do you have any last sort of comments, thoughts, plugs that you'd like to make before we wrap?
No, if anyone's listening is interested in any of the stuff that I've been talking about, we are looking for people who get where we're going and want to work as a partner on the first few iterations of things. So please reach out.